All right, Julie, I'm ready.
Okay, so welcome everybody. It's nice to see some faces. Don't feel like you have to come on camera, but I do much better having a conversation than I do just talking at a blank computer screen. So I love to see friendly faces. Welcome to It's Time to Level the Playing Field, talking about social support and social capital for improving mental health functioning for Black and Brown families. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm excited to be part of the conference, and I'm really passionate about this topic. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about it and learning from you. I'm just going to, in advance, apologize that I feel really comfortable talking about this topic, and sometimes I might say things in a way that maybe somebody wants to hear it said a little bit differently. You're welcome to just put that information into the chat. I learn every day, but I think it's really important to be able to have conversations, whether they're difficult conversations. And I don't want somebody to feel that the way that they're saying, they shouldn't say something because they're not sure how to articulate it or how to say it. I think it's more important to talk about it and to learn from each other. So I hope that we can make this a safe space where people feel comfortable learning from each other, because we all have a lot to learn.
Okay, everyone needs to put themselves on mute with the exception of Julie. Thank you.
Okay, so this is me. I'm going to start off with a little introduction. Julie Radlauer-Doerfler with the Ronik Radlauer Group. The Ronik Radlauer Group is a small organizational development firm. We're housed in Florida, but we do work nationally and internationally as well. I've been part of the Ronik Radlauer Group for over 25 years, or over 18 years, but I've been working in the human services field for 25 years. Do a lot of training, coaching, technical assistance, work on many grants, work in many different systems. My favorite system is the children's behavioral health system, children's mental health system, which is why I'm here talking to you guys today. But we also work in homelessness and HIV and adult behavioral health and physical health. And because the work that we do takes us and transcends across systems. In full disclosure, I am in the process of getting my DRPH, which is a PhD, basically in public health. So interestingly, with everything that's gone on with COVID, and how now people are very aware of what public health is, 8 months ago, I don't think many people didn't really know what public health was. And I've been studying it for a couple of years. So all the language around contact tracing and that kind of stuff and pandemic, I've been learning about that for years. And so it's both interesting and terrifying that we're going through it after I've learned everything that I've learned. The topic that, with the presentation that I'm giving today is actually my dissertation topic for my doctoral project. And so with informed consent, you are all welcome to be part of my doctoral project. I'll say that no information that you guys share would have your names involved in it, as much as important information that will guide my research. So if you say something like, oh, I think that this is a really important aspect of what you're asking, I'm going to write it down and then go research what you said to see if I can learn something to inform my project. So you all are very important to the future of, my future, but what I like to think is the future of behavioral health. And when you learn more about the project, I think you'll agree with me. So there's contact information for me, and email. That's my cell number, and the best way to reach me is through text, sadly. So I kind of wanted to just start off, and if we were a smaller group, I would say, hey, everybody, let's go around the room, but we can't do that because we're in Zoom land. So I would love, if you haven't already put the information into the chat, is to go ahead and put your information in the chat. It's, who you are and what organization you work with or where you are. I know that many of us are working from home. I know I'm working from home since March, same spot right here. And I'm home with my 3 children and my dog and my cat and my husband. And so at some point, I apologize in advance, somebody, probably my cat, will, come into our space here. And so I apologize in advance for that. She's got a knack for it. But then I'd also like if you just take a moment and put into the chat, what have you been doing for self-care? We're all really struggling with what we've been going through as you know, individually and collectively. And just, it's good to get ideas from other people about self-care. I'll tell you that for myself, I started walking around the neighborhood because I had a little more time on my hands once I was homebound. And that turned into somehow being challenged to train for a marathon. So I am, my self-care at this point is putting mileage on my sneakers. And I have a marathon scheduled for February that I'm hoping gets canceled because I don't mind running, but I'm not sure I want to do all 26 miles in one day. But so that's been my self-care. So what kinds of things did you guys put into the chat around self-care? Let's see. Okay, so we've got people doing yoga and knitting. Jazzercise sounds fun. And journaling and meditation, walking and painting. Thank you guys for sharing. If you haven't been doing something for self-care, and you know, oftentimes eating chocolate, I'm with you. Oftentimes we don't take the time for self-care. I would strongly encourage you to look at some of these ideas that are in the chat and see if something sounds interesting to you, and try to incorporate a little bit of that into your day, because we are going through unprecedented and challenging times, and nobody else is going to take care of us if we don't take care of ourselves. All right, I'm off my soapbox about that. Okay, so why are we here today? We are here today because being Black and brown is bad for your health, and that's a problem, right? So, you know, like I said, I'm going to have an honest conversation with you guys about this, and I hope that you feel comfortable having an honest conversation with me and sharing information, you know, with me. I'm going to start off by just kind of laying it all out there. Is what are we talking about today? And we're talking about healthcare disparities. And so, what are healthcare disparities? You know, healthcare disparities really refers to like a particular type of a health difference that happens to be linked to economic, social, environmental disadvantages. They typically adversely affect a particular group or people that have systematically through the years experienced greater social or economic obstacles, or you know, and health based solely on their racial or ethnic group, religion, socioeconomic status, gender, age, mental health, cognitive, sensory, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, right? All these different things relate to disparity. What we're talking about today is the intersectionality of African-American, Black and brown families and those experiencing mental health conditions, right? So the combination of those is really what we're talking about today. Okay, so let's look at some statistics. So we just kind of like understand where we're coming from, okay? So this is from California. These slides, this next couple of slides are from REI, which is the Race Equity Institute, which is an organization out of North Carolina. They do an amazing job talking about race equity across the country, right? So this first one is in California. And what this slide shows is that Black people are 2 to 9 times more likely to experience negative outcomes than white people, right? And so if you look across the bottom, it talks about different conditions that occur within society. And if you look at on, you know, across from the side, we're talking about relative rate, which means one compared to the other, right? So the blue line represents white people, and the red line represents Black people. And so the way that you would read this is, if we're talking about death from diabetes, for every 1 white person who dies from diabetes, 2 Black people die from diabetes, okay? Then if you look at infant mortality, okay, for every 1 white baby that dies, 3 Black babies die, okay? Then if we look at below grade reading levels, for every one white child who's below grade reading levels, there's 2 Black children, right? So double the amount. You look at suspensions in school, for every one white child who's suspended, there's 3 Black children who are suspended, right? If you look at incarceration, for every one white person who's incarcerated, 9 Black people are incarcerated, okay? When you look at foster care, for every one white child in foster care, there's 5 Black children in foster care. For every one white person who's unemployed, there's 2 Black people who are unemployed. For every one below poverty level white person, there's 2 below poverty level Black people. Denied mortgage rates. For every one white person denied a mortgage rate, 1.5 Black people. I don't know how you're half a Black person, but 1.5 Black people were denied mortgage rates. And then for low quality housing, again, 1.5, right? So for every one white person, right? So when you look at these disparities this way, you can say like, wow, okay, there's kind of a difference, especially in like probation system, especially in child welfare system. Those are big disparities, right? So this was from the state of California. So now let's look at Texas. Okay, so in Texas, when you look at school expulsions, for every one white child expelled, there were 4 Black children expelled, right? When you look at serious and persistent expulsions based on behavior, for every one white, there were 7 Black children expelled because of behavior. Child protective services removals, right? 1 to 3. So for every one white person, 3 Black children. When you look at children in foster care, for every one white child, there's 4 Black children in Texas, right? When you look at juvenile commitments, for every one white, there's 3 Black. And when you look for probation, for every one white, there's 5 Black. For people who are incarcerated, 1 to 4. For every one white person, 4 Black people, right? On death row, for every one white person, there's 4.5 Black people on death row. And then preterm births in Texas. For every one white preterm birth, there's 8 Black preterm births. And then diabetes death rate. For every one white person who dies from diabetes, 2 Black people die from diabetes. Okay, so that's Texas. You see similar patterns, right? There's a difference, there's a disparity between what happens, the experiences of white people compared to that of Black people, okay? Let's look at another one. This one's in North Carolina. We have like 47 more states to go, so hang in there, guys, okay? Because we're just gonna go state by state, but just kidding, just kidding. We're only gonna do a couple of states, I promise, because that's really depressing, right? I don't know if you guys are feeling depressed, but I'm feeling depressed by this, okay? So let's look here. Now we're talking about North Carolina, okay? So from around diabetes, 2.5 times difference, okay? Infant deaths in North Carolina, 2.5 times difference. 3rd grade below reading level, 2, for every one white child, there's 2 Black. Long-term suspensions, this is a big deal. For every one white child, there's 4 Black children that are suspended for a long period of time. Criminal justice, here we go again, right? It was 7 in California, it's 5. For every one white, there's 7 Black. Searched on a routine traffic stop, which is a big one, right? For every one white, there's 3.5 Black. Children in foster care in North Carolina, for every one white, there's 2.5 Black. Children living below the poverty level, for every one white, there's 2 Black. And then unemployment, for every one white, there's 2 Black. See my little cat, Emma decided to join us. All right, so, sorry, don't mind me. All right, so let's just take a minute to kind of digest that information for just a second, okay? If we're gonna be a little bit objective, so we're gonna take a step back and look at that data, we recognize that this is real, right? It's not just a thing that people talk about, okay, there's a difference, or there's a big disparity, across all systems, across many states, right? And I didn't go through all 50 states, I only went through 3, and it's depressing. So you can imagine what's gonna happen if I went through all the states, right? So in the chat, I kind of just want you to put it's almost, what's the word that comes to mind? It's almost overwhelming. It's almost unbelievable. It's almost depressing. It's almost, tell me, what are you guys thinking right now? What word comes to mind? Suffocating, sickening. Yeah, it seems deliberate. Yes, it does seem deliberate. Genocide, overwhelming. It is criminal. Yep. Right? It's unequal. Totally unequal, right? And that's the disparity in all of it. What's interesting, what I find interesting, it is frustrating and it's sad, and it's the world we live in, right? What I find really interesting and immoral, is that a lot of people still don't know this. Right? That's what wakes me up every day, is that people don't know this, that this is happening in our world, in our systems, and they choose not to know, right? But people are not aware. And so I think that conversations like this, and that's why I wish this could actually be a conversation, and why I asked Nicole if we could go into breakout rooms, is because it needs to be a conversation. Because the more we learn about this, the more we can hopefully make an impact. So it's a real thing. It happens across the country. It happens in every system, persistent in every system. It's pervasive, right? And it's across systems, within systems, across the country. It's so much so that there's actually like names for it in each system. So every system recognizes that there's a disparity, and then they have the way that they track those disparities. Okay, so in the child welfare system, it's called disproportionality, which means that there's more of one racial group, more Black children in child welfare compared to other groups and compared to the general population. In the health field, we call it health disparities, and we've seen so much about health disparities around COVID, right? So health disparities refer to that people don't have access to treatment, services, they don't have financial resources to pay for it. Their disease rates are different, but because of biological makeup or because of socio-ecological situations, and also just because of like weathering on their bodies and what they've been exposed to over their life course. In the juvenile probation system, it's called disproportionate minority contact. They even have an acronym for it, DMC, right? Like a DMC, like it used to be a band or a group, right? And so that refers to the disproportionate number of minorities in the probation system that come into contact with the juvenile probation system. In the educational system, we call it the achievement gap. So one group, white, tend to do better than another group, Black and brown, okay? In special education, it's called disproportionate representation. So one group is overrepresented over another group. And then in economic development, right, we call it historically underutilized businesses. So businesses that are disadvantaged because there's not as much of a marketplace, right? So again, it's something that I think we just have to be aware of and recognize so that we can be informed and then decide what our own individual and collective paths forward are, right? But this is, it's a thing, it's been happening for a long time. It's documented in many systems. And now with everything that's been going on in the world and social injustice in the world, we're actually at a place where we're having conversations about it, or beginning, I would say, beginning to have conversations about it. And so by you guys sitting here today and being informed in this process, my goal is that you will join the conversations. You'll have this information, you have my PowerPoint, go forth and do it, right? Go forth and make a difference around this. Educate people about these disparities, because that's the only way it's going to get any better. All right, so with all the data that I just threw at you, which was a lot of data, and I apologize, I don't like to lead with data, but we had to in this situation. So with all the data, I'm going to say to you, right, everything's in silos, right? So we've got child welfare, probation, education, all those different silos. Did you notice that something was missing, that there was a system that wasn't reported on? Did you notice? Yeah, does anybody want to go in the chat or go on mic and tell me, what did you notice? Mental health, mental health, mental health, mental health. Yay, you guys are so smart. Yep, mental health, right? So here's the thing. The mental health system doesn't really talk about this stuff. Somehow, with everything that's going on in the world, the mental health system has somehow been able to slide under the radar a little bit. And the systemic racism of the mental health system has not been explored in the ways that it has in other systems, in other silos, right? So let's look at it. All right, watch this for 1 second. So sorry, my cat had to be let out of my room. In full disclosure. So let's look at this. So let's talk about what's happening in the mental health system. There are disparities, right? There are disparities. We knew it. We know it. Of course there are. They're in every system. The thing is, we don't talk about it as much. Do you guys talk about disparities in the mental health system? You hear about it a lot? I'm seeing some yeses. I'm seeing some no's, right? So yeah, some people, yes, we're talking about it. Some people, they didn't really, you know, we haven't heard it as much as we have in other systems, right? So some people, yes, some people we're getting some yeses. That makes me feel a little bit better that there are some yeses. And then some no's, and then some not, we don't talk about it enough, right? So for every 31% of white children that have mental health challenges and actually receive mental health treatment, there's 13% of Black and brown children that receive mental health treatment. Okay, that's a disparity. You see the difference. Now, that's not saying white children have diagnoses more than Black children. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, if both groups have diagnoses, one group gets treatment more than the other. Right now, whether that's because one group seeks treatment more than the other, we don't. That's not what the statistic didn't get down to that level, right? One group is treated more than the other, receives treatment more than the other. That's a disparity. Let's talk about what the data says around Black and brown youth. Okay. So in 2017, suicide was the second leading cause of death for African American youth. Second leading cause. African American youth experienced serious psychological stress within the past 30 days, 3 times more than white youth. 1 to 3, serious psychological stress within the past 30 days. Only 1 in 3 African Americans who need mental health care receive mental health care. The rate of mental illness in African Americans are similar to the general population, so similar rates. However, disparities exist in the quality of care, access to care, and then access to culturally competent care, which probably relates to the quality and the access, right? African Americans make up 13% of the population, but they're overrepresented in high-risk populations. So 40% of homeless individuals are African American. 50% of the prison population are African American, and 45% of the child welfare population are African American, right? And then when you think about it, the mental health system correlates strongly with all of these populations, right? So there's a connection there that we need to be paying attention to. So let's talk about why. Why do these disparities, why do they exist? I skipped a slide. Sorry. I just want to talk about this for a second because I think it's important. Recognizing within different systems, right? So like the child welfare system, the reason that there's more, why this bias exists, why there's, more children in that system, is because in the child welfare system, like the system, we're paying more attention to the efficiency than we are to the needs. So did the child get out of the system within 30 days, or did the child go into the system, or did the child within a year were they, reunited with their family? We're paying more attention to those details than we are to the overall outcomes, if you will. In probation, we're not recognizing that, that bias exists when it comes to if somebody actually committed the crime, culpability, right? And that the person who made the decision that this child should be arrested might be operating off of their own bias, right? So that disproportionately impacts the system. In the school system, there's no clear-cut policy about how children, youth should behave, or how behavior should be addressed. And I'm sure you guys know that from, the work that you do, and also being parents of children that, are involved in the school system, right? So different teachers deal with things in different ways. And because there's no clear-cut policies around that, it lends itself to, as an educator, I can use my own bias and how to address behaviors that are happening in the classroom, right? And then in the mental health field, we're paying more attention to the demographics, like where somebody comes from, instead of just the behaviors that they're presenting with, right? And so what ends up happening is that Black youth end up being like underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed because we're not taking into consideration their behaviors. So we have to pay attention to these bias, because that makes a big difference in the treatment that's being provided. Sorry about that. So let's talk about the reasons for disparities, okay? We were talking about disparities before I flipped back to that one slide. Let's talk about the reasons for disparities. So it's been documented that stigma is a big reason why Black and brown families do not seek treatment, right? 63% of African Americans believe that mental health condition is a personal sign of weakness, right? And so that survey was conducted with African American men who reported that if they were to seek treatment, they would feel as though it was a sign of weakness. There is historical distrust of any health system, as well as the behavioral health system. And that's really related to research and treatment. As part of my doctoral project, I did research into the origins of the behavioral health system. And really what the research demonstrates is that the system was designed in a way that systemic racism and structural racism is kind of like baked into the system. Things like, the way diagnoses were applied to people, the way diagnoses were invented. In fact, around the time of, like in the 1960s, when we were dealing with the changes that were happening in that time, that's around the time that the DSM-4 went into a different, edification, a new version. And some of the criteria was actually changed based on the social situation that was happening in the world. And the result of that is that African-American men received schizophrenic diagnosis more frequently, right? So just things that are happening in our world are impacting the way that people are diagnosed. Another really big reason for these disparities is there's a lack of diverse mental health providers, right? So less than 2% of all psychologists and psychiatrists are Black, and less than 4% of all therapists are Black, right? And so if I'm somebody who's struggling with issues around my identity or issues about any kind of racism that has happened to me, am I going to feel comfortable if I'm Black or brown? Am I going to feel comfortable going and talking to a white person about it? Probably not. So then I'm not going to go to treatment. So then you look at the research around who receives treatment or not. It's not only that somebody hasn't been offered treatment, it's also that they choose not to get their needs met that way. But the problem is, systemically, all of our dollars go into those services at the governmental level, right? So that's what creates the disparity. If all the resources go into traditional treatment, but I, as a human being, because of my experiences in this world, don't feel like I should go see somebody in that way, in a traditional treatment way, then I'm not benefiting from how the system has been designed. And that's a problem, right? And then even beyond just the color of my skin, I could be a practitioner who's not culturally competent, right? So I could have not gone through the work that I need to on a personal level so that I can be there for somebody from a different, socioeconomic class or race or ethnicity, right? I have to do that work so that I feel more comfortable with it. Another highly reported reason for disparities is insurance, lack of insurance, underinsurance, not understanding insurance, all of those aspects of the process, which is a really big deal. And then oftentimes in lower socioeconomic communities, which has a high prevalence rate of Black and brown people, they are exposed to things like adverse childhood experiences, which impacts your mental health, right? So there's more violence in communities where there's a larger preponderance of Black and brown people living. So what I would like to do is I would like to put you guys into breakout room, or Nicole's going to put you into breakout room. And I thought maybe we just take a couple of minutes to talk about what I just threw up all over you. Talk about all the information that you just learned and that was put in front of you. And how does that make you feel? And why do you think that what are your reasons for why you think that these disparities are happening? You know, I mentioned stigma and distrust of the system and lack of providers and, lack of culturally competent providers and insurance, but you might have other reasons. And I would love if you guys would just go in and talk about it. And then maybe one person could be the person in charge of writing some notes down. And then when we come back, you can maybe each group could maybe type some of the things that they discussed into the chat, that person who's responsible. Does that sound like a good plan? Just take maybe 10 minutes to go in and have a little chat about it.
Yeah. Hi, Julie. I'm going to randomly put people in rooms. So I'm going to click open rooms. When I click it, you will get a message on your computer and just click to go into the room. And then I'll send another message when we're about to end the room. Okay. In the breakout room. Okay. Everybody ready?
Have fun in your rooms, guys. Go to your rooms.
Recording, and now you can go. Go ahead.
Really? Is that all that? I have to say it again. Okay. So did everybody have a good time? That was good? You learned a lot? Yes. Okay. And now I get to see faces. I love seeing faces. Thank you for being here. So I wish we could talk about everything that you guys just discussed and learned from each other, and we just can't. But I would love if somebody, you had representatives from your group, if you could all just, one person type into the chat what your group talked about, and we'll kind of read them aloud so we can get a sense of what each other was talking about. So quality of services sounds like some of the reasons why there are disparities, for sure. Trauma, 100%, and bias, the criminal justice system, lack of empathy, for sure. Yeah, school to prison pipeline is a huge one. Yeah, the more that you look at this, and not that anybody can be completely objective, because we all know just enough to be dangerous. Some people know more than that. I know just enough just to be dangerous, but I'm learning more every day, which is why I love to do these kinds of presentations, because I learn from you guys. There's just not enough Black and brown providers. And so if we want to talk about pipelines, that'd be a beautiful pipeline to build, right? Is to figure out a way to get more Black and brown representation in the professional world, right? Yeah, some of the reasons for disparities are just built into the culture of people that need support sometimes. And some cultures lean more on religiosity than others, is a big thing. Funding is a big issue. And it always comes down to money. At the end, it always comes down to money. My premise around all of this is that the way that the United States is spending their dollars on behavioral health treatment does not address the needs of all. And so for me, that's the systemic racism and the structural racism in the system. And that's what we need to change, is we need to change the types of services that are being provided in a way that they can meet the needs of everybody. Which means more peer support and more social support, more social capital. We're going to talk about that.
And Julie, Nicole, one of the things I just thought about disparities with not having enough Black or brown people who are working in the mental health systems. I think part of it is, wanting to go to school, but not having the funds or not enough money for financial aid or to be able to afford the degree. I know I worked on my degree. I did a master's, I did a BS in psychology, master's in education, and I did began to work on a PhD in human psychology, human behavior, but because I ran out of money, I couldn't afford it, I couldn't finish school.
Right. I mean, as you said that, I just wrote down that, there are people that are paying for scholarships all the time. Why is somebody not paying for to send Black and brown youth to get their master's degree in counseling, so that's a great, suggestion. So thank you. Or, problem that you presented that could be used as an opportunity.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, this whole topic is just huge. And when you're focusing on at the greater good, there's problems, challenges, needs in every system in every direction. But then when you just focus on the behavioral health system, you realize that it's pervasive just within this one system, in addition to all the other across systems, right? And so that's really my mission, is to look at that and to say, how do we fix this one system, knowing that they all intersect. There seems to be a lot of champions in other systems. There's not a lot of champions around disparities in the behavioral health system. So if anybody wants to join me on my quest, you're more than welcome to. I want to do this quick activity. I want you for a moment to think about the biggest crisis that you've ever had in your own personal life. You're not going to have to share this information, okay? You do not have to share this information out loud. Just for a moment, think about a challenging time that you had. Since we're in 2020, I'm just going to make the assumption that everybody can think of something, right? And then I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many of you got through the biggest crisis you've ever had in your own personal life through the assistance of your faith? Raise your hand if you got through your crisis with your faith. You can answer more than one time, but.
Julie, you cut out for a second. Can you repeat that?
Sure. Okay. I was saying, I want you to think about the biggest crisis you've ever had in your own personal life. And then I want you to think about, with the show of hands, how many of you got through the biggest crisis you've ever had in your own personal life through the assistance of your faith? And how many of you would say your faith is what got you through? Okay, thank you. How many of you got through the biggest crisis you've ever had in your entire life through the assistance of your family? Your family helped you get through that crisis? Yeah. How many of you got through the biggest crisis you've ever had in your entire life through the assistance of your friends? Your friends or your peers helped you get through that crisis? Yeah. And how many got through the biggest crisis you ever had in your entire life through the assistance of a paid professional with an advanced degree? Okay, a couple of hands, right? Not quite as many, right? And so would you think about that? If I said, okay, raise your hands if you got through with faith, raise your hand and keep it up. And with family, raise your hands and keep it up. Yeah. And with friends, raise your hands and keep it up. You know, we see lots of hands, you know. And then if I go back to paid professionals, advanced degrees, not so many hands, a couple of hands, right? So a couple of hands, which is good for me because job security, right? I'm a licensed mental health counselor, so there you go. There will always be people in this world that need me. But the majority of us, myself included, when we are going through a crisis, we get through a crisis with our faith and our friends and our families. The problem is that, once again, our system, the behavioral health system, it reimburses people, paid professionals with advanced degree. So if you don't get your help that way, then you're not, nobody's paying for you to get help. You don't get help unless you can seek it out yourself, right? And so there's the disparity, the discrepancy in the system that we have to fix. Okay, so let's talk about what the research says. Now, this is the research, okay? What the research says about how Black and brown families prefer to have their mental health needs met. This is what the research says. So they prefer to work with mental health providers that look like them and share their experiences. That's what the research says, right? The research also says that they prefer to get support from their family than from a paid professional. Further, the research says that faith-based counseling from a pastor is sought out before professional, traditional counseling. Youth prefer to get support or mental health services at school and from their friends, as opposed to going to an office in a traditional setting. There's research that documents that learning about values and beliefs using an Afrocentric perspective, learning about African beliefs is a way that African American families prefer to have their mental health needs addressed. And then GMA, which is collective work, that's really built on maintaining the community and working together as a community, how we can all support each other and help each other, is one aspect that's been noted in research. And so I will say that arguably or inarguably, that this list is completely incomplete, right? That there are definitely more ways that African American and Black and brown families prefer to have their mental health needs met. And so I'd like to throw you back into a group for a few minutes and have you chat about that. Maybe we'll just give like 5 minutes this time. Are you guys up for another group, or would you prefer to do it in the chat? Who wants to go back in another group and chat with each other for a little bit? Raise the hands. This is a couple of hands. Would you rather just have a larger conversation and put it in the chat? Who wants to do that? I like to practice voice and choice.
If it's only 5 minutes, I prefer the larger group.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing lots of hands for that. Okay, so then let's go ahead and do it in the chat. Yeah, I would have loved to have a larger conversation. You guys, you know me at this point, you know that I would have preferred to have a larger conversation too. Okay, so then let's go ahead, just put it in the chat. What are some ways that you guys think that Black and brown families prefer to have your mental health needs met? How do you think, if you are somebody who's Black or brown, then you can put in how you would prefer to have your mental health needs met, or people that you know. And if you work with people or you know people and you think, well, you know what, seems like, you know, my best friend really likes to go yoga classes or something, you know, what is it that person does? You know, I'll read some stuff out from the chat. Let's see what comes up. You guys are really chatty. I love it. Okay, so I'm seeing peer support, people with lived experience, faith-based. Okay, in-home as opposed to in the office is huge, right? Family and peers, peer, yeah, I hear you, peer. Like options is a beautiful thing, right? So not just traditional outpatient, but options. Oh, telehealth, I like that. You know, people have given telehealth such a bum rap, but there's some conveniences around that too, right? Mindfulness in a church. So maybe even traditional counseling, but maybe in a place where I'm more comfortable. So not in an office, but maybe in a church would make it better, right? Somebody who represents me, I think is good over food and drinks. I like it. I agree with that one for sure. Thank you guys for sharing your thoughts and ideas around that. I think that's really important. That's a lot of what my research actually is unfurling. So once again, in an aggregate way, you are all supporting my research. So I am grateful. All right, so we have all this newfound information. What's the path forward? What are we going to do about it? Right? We know that the system is disparate. We know that the way that traditional treatment services have been provided do not meet the needs of Black and Brown families. We know that there are preferences to treatment that are not available in the current behavioral health delivery system. We know all of this. And frankly, up until this point, we've known all of this for a long time, but nobody's really taken it to the next level. So what are we going to do about it, right? It's nice to talk about it. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to fix this change, right? How are we going to make this change happen? What's our path forward? So here's my hypothesis. It's based on research, is that we need to expand access to social supports and make that something that gets reimbursed or available more in our communities. Take dollars away from traditional services and figure out a way to reimburse and support and grow social support. So social support refers to, it's a perception that somebody actually really, cares about you, that's there if you need help, that is, and part of this kind of overall supportive social network, right? So social support refers to, if I need somebody, they will be there. So let's talk about the benefits of social support. So research documents that positive association with a social relationship improves mental and physical health. So much so that it actually, having social support decreases mortality rates, right? So if you have friends, you live longer. Social relationships buffer the stress that's happening, improves mental health. And we just think about COVID for a minute. There are some people who are 100% isolated because they have no social support, and think about the mental health conditions that they might be experiencing, as opposed to like you guys who are on a Zoom call and talking to actual human beings, right? So that support system makes a difference in somebody's mental health, right? Having access to the support system. Having social supports promotes lifelong good mental health practices, because we can get ahead of it. It enhances self-esteem, improves healthy choices, and then frankly, improves motivation. I started walking in the beginning of COVID because I had to get out of my house. I could not sit right here all day, every day and not do anything physical. And then when my friend decided to challenge me to train for a marathon, I'm usually not a competitive person, right? But it was really helpful that I knew I had to meet her, to continue to walk every day. And then I started from walking and now I'm running, right? So that accountability created motivation for me to do something that I might not have done. Some of the components of social support, if you want to break it down, right? It's the quality of good social relationships. It's having access to a network, if you will, right? So those network ties and those network relationships. It's emotional caring and concern, right? So you genuinely care for somebody, or you know that somebody genuinely cares for you, okay? Social influence, so really kind of guidance about your norms and expectations and the way that you act. When you have social support, they keep you in line. Sometimes with our youth, they take them out of line, right? That too. But for the most part, they keep us in line. So social networks, they're there to encourage us and monitor us, and persuade us, and sometimes pressure us, right? Run a marathon to do positive things. Anybody ever tried to lose weight? Sadly, most people can raise their hand when we say that, right? Well, if you're working with somebody to lose weight, it's a little bit easier. If you do Weight Watchers, It works because there's this accountability factor where you have to step on a scale in front of somebody, right? And so that knowing that there's somebody there who's paying attention to what I'm doing makes me more accountable, right? And social support provides emotional support and information, access to information, right? So all of those things are benefits of social supports, or the components of social supports. Another aspect of my research is around what's called social capital. And this concept is a little bit confusing for people, but social capital really refers to how groups function, right? So through interpersonal relationships, shared identity, shared understanding, shared norms and values, trust. So social capital is basically social support, but at the community level. So it's the way that we as a community can support each other to improve our population mental health, right? So collectively, we're going to work together to improve our mental health. So like an example of this would be, say you're walking around your neighborhood and you see some trash and you pick it up, right? So does it benefit me personally to pick up that trash? No, not really. Maybe if I'm trying to get some exercise bending down, it might help me, but no, it doesn't benefit me personally, right? However, does it benefit the community? Yes, right? And so I'm going to go pick up trash, not because I think somebody else is going to pick up trash behind me, but because it's the right thing to do. So I'm creating that shared identity, that shared understanding, those shared norms and values. And I'm going to do something good, not with the expectation that somebody will do something good for me, but that somebody else will do something to benefit our larger community. That's social capital, right? And so what are the benefits of social capital? We can form relationships that way. It's access to resources by understanding social capital. One person's perception of the community predicts the psychological well-being. So if I believe that this community is a good, positive community to be a part of, then there's a greater likelihood that this community will do well together, if you will, right? Connections between social capital and understanding well-being. So when I have access to people or places or things, I have better mental health well-being, right? Even just down to church, people who attend church, they report better life satisfaction. There's research around that. Better social networks results in better overall health. When you have access to people who can support you, who can get you to doctor's appointments and help you take your medication, right? That also provides that kind of social capital, if you will, right? Okay. And then at the end, building relationships gives you access to social capital, resources, social support, and just better overall interactions. So let's talk about the components of social capital. It's about networks, right? So it's about knowing people. It's about norms and trust, feeling safe within your community. Social support tends to be an aspect of social capital, because remember, social capital is like this larger systems perspective, and the social support piece is like more at the individual level, if you will, right? That reciprocity, doing the right thing, having those important connections to people, and then, neighborhood organizations, community building type activities, all of that contributes to overall mental health. So not at the individual level, but at the systems level. Okay. So what's next? What's next is, I just want to make sure that you're all aware of my doctoral project. I feel like I'm the salesperson here. And so this research that I've shared with you today is related to my doctoral project, right? And so it's kind of a response to structural racism in the behavioral health system. We're going to explore social support and social capital to create equity. My point is, if the behavioral health system will put financial resources into expanding social support and social capital, more African American, Black and Brown people would have their mental health needs met. If the behavioral health system continues to only fund traditional treatment services, then Black and Brown people will continue to not attend and participate in those services, right? And so if we want to make a difference, we have to change the system, not the response of the system. And so what you guys benefited from today was a literature review. All those disparity statistics that I shared was from a literature review. And one thing that I'm doing is I'm doing interviews with Black and Brown families to ask them about their interests and how they would want their mental health needs met. So if anybody's interested in participating in the research, there'll be Zoom interviews. It'll take about an hour of your time. And anybody who's interested is welcome to put your name in the chat and then maybe an email address or some way that I can contact you so that I can reach out to you afterwards to kind of make that connection. I'll be doing the interviews next week or next month. I'm sorry, next year in January, February. And then also I'm going to be interviewing professionals, therapists and case managers to ask them about how their experience about how the families that they work with would want their services. And then I'm going to be interviewing system leaders. And I have to prepare a presentation for systems leaders and funders to tell them all the findings so that hopefully they'll begin to make changes to the way that they fund the systems and fund services. And then I'm creating a policy brief for the, that higher level, if you will. And all of this is with the vision of creating equity, right? And so has anybody ever seen this slide before? Pretty common, right? Slide. I think some of you guys would have seen it. Good, yeah. So, equality is what people say, well, let's just make everything equal. Well, that doesn't help us, right? Because if we're the little guy, we still don't have access, right? But if we create equity, which is making sure that everybody's able to see at the same level, then there's a greater likelihood that people will have good outcomes. But in the end, what we're really striving for is this, right? So we're going to move from equality, which doesn't help everybody, to equity, which helps everybody, but really what we strive for is liberation. We want to make sure that everybody has free access, free equal access, and feels that they have the exact same playing field, that they don't need a leg up in order to have equity, right? That we're all starting from exactly the same space. That's what we're striving for. That's where we want it. That's where we want to end up. And so I believe that you guys have now been charged with the mission, whether you wanted it or not, charged with the mission to reimagine her future and, Black and Brown families that we work with, their future with regards to mental health. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Anybody's interested in participating in the research, I would encourage you to put the information into the chat. Does anybody have any questions? Or Jill, you have questions?
I just want to say thank you because, as I mentioned to you before we started, I think it's really important that we involve ourselves in these conversations, no matter what race that you are, that we need to keep pushing the envelope and bringing light to this topic and this discussion. That's the only way we're going to be able to begin to get over many of these hurdles that keep coming up. But as collectively and as a community, we have to do it together.
Yes, I 100% agree. I'm looking in the chat and thank you guys so much. I see that many of you put your names in there. So I will get this information before we sign off so that I can reach out to you to join me on this journey.
And everybody, I put the link to the keynote in the chat box and to the survey. Again, if you don't get a chance to do the survey, it's fine. You will still get it in an email. So,
Malia, mahalo.
But thank you everyone for being here today, and
thank you very much. It was so nice to see some friendly faces. I hope you enjoyed them. Okay.
Julie, good luck on your work for your PhD.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'll be happy when it's over. So I am really enjoying the process.
That's good.
Obviously, you could tell, right?
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions, I'll stick around.
Yeah, we can stay around for about 7 minutes. Mostly people saying
Nicole, should I write the names down, or you think you'll be able to?
I'll get them to you.
Okay.